We've all had those moments. A bus barely misses you at the crosswalk. You take a different route to work, and later find out it avoided a fatal crash. Or maybe it's deeper than that. A strange feeling stops you from going out, and that night, there's a fire. You feel lucky, grateful, like you just got a second chance. But what if that wasn't the end? What if death has a plan? What if you were just next on its list? And now, it's coming back to finish the job.
Oh, hey! So, anyway, let's talk about those movies. You know the ones. The movies that ruined roller coasters, tanning beds, and logging trucks forever. That's right, Final Destination. Hello, my friends, and welcome to LukieSpooks. How are you doing? How are you going? Well, I hope you're doing well, and I thank you for joining me tonight. Or today, whatever timeline you're on. My name is Luke, and I'm here to deliver to you all things strange, spooky, and spiritually suspicious. If you love horror movies, rabbit holes, mysteries, the paranormal, what lies beyond, maybe some true crime, or even a conspiracy or two, then you're in the right club, because we all fam. This two-part video kicks off a series I like to call Behind the Screams. I absolutely love horror movies. What I love more than that is the lore behind them, the behind-the-scenes lowdown, the impact on society and pop culture, and just what they teach us as viewers. So I decided to start with Final Destination for a couple reasons. First and foremost, and very simply, it's just one of my favorite horror movies and film franchises. Now, I know there is a lot of debate about these movies. There's a lot to talk about. There's this love-hate discourse about the movies just because of the gore of it all and the premise of the movies themselves. And speaking of gore, we're going to be talking about some gruesome stuff in these videos, so viewer discretion is advised. Although I've done my best to try and avoid anything too heavy just to avoid any problems on that front. We'll see if editing Luke can hold true to that. He couldn't. Anyway, love them or hate them, these movies are absolutely wild, and they've solidified their reputation in the horror film industry. These films punch you in the gut and take you for a thrill ride from the beginning to the end. They stick with you and they make you think long after you leave the theater, long after that last scene. I mean, that's why we love to talk about these movies. Also, the sixth installment just came out in May of 2025, after a 14-year-long hiatus, so the timing was just perfect. Again, with 6 movies spanning almost 3 decades, multiple premonitions, countless gruesome deaths, and this evolving set of rules that govern death, which oftentimes are irksome, it goes without saying that there's a lot to unpack with these movies. A lot.
Mucho.
Now, just to give you a little bit of background, when I finally decided to do this video, what I really wanted to focus on was the stuff that I truly love. Why these movies make such an impact personally and on society, all the behind-the-scenes action, interesting facts and tidbits, and real-life connections. Also, there are so many reviews and recaps of all the Final Destination movies, so I just really didn't want to go make more of the same. However, it just didn't seem right to go into all that other juicy stuff without doing some sort of recap of the movies. And in order to do that, it just made more sense to turn this into a two-parter. And I promise you will not have to wait too long for part 2. It's gonna be good. And here's where I try not to bury the lead too hard. But this is my first YouTube video. You can do it! So please forgive me if the audio or the video or the lighting isn't quite perfect yet. It has been a steep learning curve. But I'm learning a lot and I'm enjoying the process. Like, if I left this part in here, it's because I couldn't figure out color correction for the first 2 movie recaps. So here's proof that I'm not actually that orange. Anyway, I really appreciate your support and cannot thank you enough for being here. And I'm always looking to improve, so any helpful comments are wanted and welcomed to guide me in an effort to deliver high quality content that you want and deserve. Now, my goal for this video is to go over the premonitions, key points, and evolution of Death's rules for each film in this franchise. Enough information to paint a colorful picture with my own insights, of course, but most importantly, to get you ready and hyped for all of the mayhem that's coming along with part 2. Now, I could spend an hour for each movie doing a deep dive on all of this stuff. Not that I'm not highly interested in doing an entire series solely based on the Final Destination franchise, because it totally deserves it. But until I make my own, especially if that's what you guys want, I highly recommend you check out the videos by incredible creators like Cody Leach, who go in deep into all of the plots and all of the deaths for every movie. So don't be coming at me like, oh, LukieSpooks, you didn't go into all of the deaths. Or do come at me, just be nice about it, and saying that that's what you want me to do, and I will gladly do that. But this is just your fair warning of what you can expect with this video. And if that bothers you, just wait for part 2. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. Because in part 2, we're gonna be talking about how and why these movies scarred a generation, log scene, enough said, juicy behind the scenes clips and trivia, Final Destination in real life, like what's to come of the franchise, and just maybe answer the question, does death have a design? Spoiler alert, it doesn't. It's a movie and it's all fake. Or is it? You'll just have to come back for part 2 for a hot take or 2. But none of that really matters, because there's a reason, many reasons, why these movies have taken Gen Xers, millennials, and now Gen Zers by the throat and have not let go. So, with all of that being said, let's dive into the absolute horror fest that is Final Destination. If you're here, you've likely already seen all of these movies. If you haven't, just leave right now and go binge them all, and then come back with all of your trauma. We'll be waiting. I'm also going to be talking about the 6th installment, Bloodlines, so there will be spoilers, but I promise to give you a heads up for that one because I know there's probably a good chance some of you haven't seen it yet. Without further ado, let's get into the first movie. Final Destination 1. It was released on March 17th, 2000 and directed by James Wan. So this is where the whole death has a design, death can't be cheated idea comes to life. So we meet our main character Alex, and he's with a group of friends. They're at the airport because they're about to board a plane and go to Paris for a school trip. So Alex and the cast of typical, stereotypical high school students, they board the infamous Flight 180, which we will hear about essentially for the rest of the franchise. So Alex is on the plane and he starts to get an air of odd things happening around him. He's starting to pick up just weird signals and signs, and he just gets very uneasy. So the plane takes off, and what seems like innocent turbulence turns into absolute chaos as the plane just falls apart and then explodes into this fiery ball and it is just, it's very intense. It was a lot for my 8-year-old eyes. It's probably too young to see this movie. However, we get a jump cut back to Alex on the plane as he wakes up in a panic from this nightmare, which is actually a premonition. And so it begins. Man, I just remember like seeing that for the first time, and like, you know how you wish sometimes you could experience the first time you've experienced something? Like,
have you ever had a dream that you once that you had?
Like, you know, these movies hadn't been out yet, and you just had like no idea. Well, I guess if you had seen the previews, but I hadn't seen the previews. I didn't even know this movie existed. It was kind of thrust upon me. Okay. So Alex wakes up from this nightmare in a total panic and just goes into this crazy spiral and is yelling that the plane is going to explode. The plane's gonna explode! So obviously this causes everyone else to freak out, and this gets Alex escorted off the plane, along with multiple other characters that get escorted off with him. So the plane ends up taking off without this cast of characters, and in, you know, the quite infamous scene, we see them all at the gate arguing about what had just happened, and then we see in the background that the plane just explodes. It's just beginning. So, because of Alex's premonition, he and the rest of these characters get off the plane and are not killed in the fiery explosion of death. It's a big bummer for everyone involved. It gets worse when one by one, each character starts dying in these freak accident, these just freak accidents. Very freaky, weird freak accidents that have these Rube Goldberg-like setups. So one thing happens after another thing, happens after another thing, until, I mean, most of us have seen the movie, so we get that. And this, unfortunately, all starts with Alex's best friend, Todd, who he survived a plane crash as well. Bummer for Todd. And everyone else that's about to get absolutely fucked. Alex starts to form a bond with another character named Clear Waters. Yes, Clear Waters, not Claire. We don't know why. Clear is played by Ali Larter, and she was also another student that got off the plane as well, and we find out that it was because she believed in what Alex was saying. She also had a feeling.
I didn't see what you saw. I felt it.
What if Todd was just the first of us?
Is it something that you're...
Clear, the dark soul that she is, decides to take Alex to the morgue to find out more about what happened with Todd's death. And this is where we meet William Bloodworth.
Please. You'll wake the dead.
Bloodworth is the undertaker at this morgue, and he's played by Tony Todd, which I think this was just awesome casting, because if you've ever seen Candyman, Tony Todd is absolutely terrifying. Like, absolutely terrifying. So in this movie, Tony Todd plays like the wise one, who knows so much about death because he's around it all the time. And we'll actually find out later why this is just like such an awesome twist that they added in with the most recent installment. This is when we learn that first golden rule, that death doesn't like to be cheated. Alex and his friends were meant to die on that plane. And since they escaped, well, death is going to come back and it's going to finish the job.
In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes. Your friend's departure shows that death has a new design for all of you. Now you have to figure out how and when it's coming back at you.
This is where we also learn about signs. So if you pay enough attention, death will leave hints at what its next move is going to be, which ends up just being a huge hallmark of the film and the whole franchise, because I'm pretty sure by like the 6th film, almost every single shot has either a sign or an Easter egg or some kind of hint about how death is going to make its next move. So Naturally, Alex becomes obsessed with figuring out what Death's design is for him and the rest of his friends that are still alive. Alex pieces together that Death has a plan to take out the survivors of Flight 180 in the same order that they died in, or they would have died in, when the plane exploded. As the plot progresses, it's learned that if someone or something intervenes and breaks the chain of death, then Death will just go on to the next person. But not only that, it'll circle back around until it's picked off each one of its victims, one by one. We find this out at the very end when Alex, Clear, and Carter finally make it to Paris, where everything seems just safe and happy. Until a chill fills the air, and someone has the balls to ask, who's next on Death's list?
But I am the safest fucker in the world, because you're still next.
Like, why? Like, you made it to Paris, just move on, enjoy it, enjoy Paris. Go to the Louvre. Anyway, the answer to that question is Alex. Alex is next on Death's list. A nearby bus comes rushing by and causes this big sign to fall down and almost swing and hit Alex. Except Carter saves the day and comes in and pushes Alex out of the way. Unfortunately for Carter, he was the next one on the list after Alex, so
who's next?
So the sign ends up swinging back the other way and just absolutely spanks Carter. Apparently during the test screenings, everyone was very excited that Carter finally bit the dust. So yeah, this is the main template of the movies. The main character has a premonition about a mass casualty event and either intervenes or escapes. And with that, they take multiple other characters with them. But Death doesn't like to be cheated, so it takes them out one by one in the same order that it would have done originally. The main character discovers this and does their best to convince and warn others about their inevitable demise, and the new rules of Death are learned along the way. But in the end, Death always wins. And for the first time, at least in a modern sense, filmmakers use Death as the killer instead of this tangible being. People lost their minds. People went nuts. What do you mean Death is the killer? The killer is the murderer. The murderer is Death. Good luck. Good luck with that one. Okay, so Final Destination 1, a lot of the ground rules are laid, a lot of the good foundation. 2 years later, we get Final Destination 2 in 2003. Overall, this was a very solid sequel, which, you know, sequels in general, like a good sequel is hard to achieve, but especially for horror films, I just thought that the filmmakers knocked it out of the park, especially with this premonition sequence. Like, honestly, it's been hard to rank them, but this could be my favorite premonition sequence. Hello, Death by Log. And I think they did a really good job of keeping true to the franchise while adding some new spins to the lore. So Final Destination 2 features that infamous highway pileup scene. You have cars and trucks just getting absolutely crushed. You have bikers flying across the pavement, metal flying, and maybe the most impactful death in the entire franchise. So much so that it leached into popular culture and everyday life. Yes, the impalement of the police officer by the road log. Oh! Straight to the dome. Also, this is the point in the franchise where we start to get like very detailed deaths during the premonition sequences, which we didn't really get in the first movie because the characters had to discover that still, so that wasn't supposed to be as salient in the first movie. At least that's kind of how I take it. So our main character Kimberly and her BFFs are about to get on the highway for a nice little road trip down to Florida when she has her premonition.
Easy, Kimmy, first year driving?
So, Kimberly blocks the entrance ramp onto the highway. People are pissed. Can you imagine? I'd be so pissed off. Be like, move, bitch. But then the pileup starts to happen, and although it seems that Kimberly and her friends are safe, a truck comes flying by, and the police officer pulls her out of the way, saves Kimberly. Unfortunately, Kimberly's friends are still in the SUV and get instantly unalived when they get T-boned by a rogue truck. Honestly, this was very much so a chef's kiss moment, I thought, because we're all expecting like Kimberly and her like teen friends to be the center of this movie, and then they're just like taken out so quickly, and then we come to learn that it's like about everyone else involved in the crash. Now, this installment does not disappoint when it comes to delivering those jaw-dropping death moments, but I want to focus on the new developments in the lore. We learn that Clear from the first installment is still alive, albeit in a self-committed mental high protection facility. And we also learn that Death finally caught up to Alex via a falling brick to the head.
And this is what happened to Alex when I was responsible for him. Get out.
Really? Like, after all of that, you just, that's how you take Alex out? You did him dirty. So Kimberly seeks the help of Clear, and this is where we start to expand upon the lore of Death's design. A wild card. Apparently, Death can work in reverse. There's this moment of confusion between Kimberly and Clear, because as Kimberly is explaining to her what's been happening, she's realizing that Death is actually working in the reverse order instead of the original order, like in the first movie.
At last. Backwards. Are you sure?
So in this movie, the last people to die in the premonition are the first people to die when Death comes back around. Not much else is really said about this. I've seen this movie so many times and I've never gotten a clear reasoning as to why it happens in this movie. We just have Clear being straight up like,
backwards. Are you sure?
and then we move on. So one possibility that it could be, which I don't know if it maybe is explicitly stated at some point and I've just missed it, but someone realizes that everyone involved in this premonition was somehow linked to Flight 180, and the only reason that they're alive now is because of the survivors of the flight.
Okay, so last May, I'm supposed to go and stay at this cheesy little bed and breakfast in Pennsylvania, right? So anyhow, there's this major gas leak that no one knows about, and all the guests suffocated during the night. No, I never made it. The bus I was on splattered some girl all over the road.
Was that not Abraham?
Yes. How did you know?
That bus you were on killed Terry Cheney. She was supposed to die on Flight 180.
So for instance, if there had been no survivors from that flight, then the people in this premonition would have never survived either. And so essentially Death is coming back around to clean up its mess. So maybe that's why it's a reverse order? I'm not sure, but please drop a comment if you have any insight into this, because I would love to hear your thoughts, and like maybe I'm just missing something here. I do think that this twist plays out really well, especially if you go and watch the crash scene again, because you realize that even before the original Death sequence has finished, Death has already come back around and started to take out the people who survived. So it went for Kimberly first, but the cop pulled her out of the way, and then it took her best friends out, like right away. Like that was all still happening before the entire original car crash had even finished. Like, that don't waste no time. So Kimberly and Clear take a little trip to meet our friend Bloodworth.
Hello, Claire.
And this is where we get our next rule, that only new life can defeat death.
What the hell does that mean?
For the introduction of life that was not meant to be, that could invalidate the list, force death to start anew.
So with this new rule about death, Kimberly, Clear, and the cop think that they have a way out. Isabella, one of the people that was saved in the car crash, is pregnant. Perfect! If they can ensure the safe delivery of Isabella's baby, then the chain can be broken. Nope. The baby is born, and death continues its rampage. So Kimberly ends up having a vision that shows that Isabella was never meant to die in the crash.
Fantastic.
Also, sometime around here, Death eventually catches up to Clear. Remember, Death always comes back. And with Clear's death, Death officially finishes its job from the first movie. So this leads us to the end, where Kimberly realizes that if she were to say, die, and then come back to life, that might break the chain of death. Because, as Bloodworth says, life that was not meant to be can invalidate the list. In a desperate attempt, Kimberly drives a van into the lake and attempts to drown herself. She's successful, and she's eventually revived back to life in the hospital, and they did confirm that she flatlined, so technically she was dead. So Kimberly comes back to life, and the movie ends. And as far as we know, Kimberly and Mr. Hot Cop lived happily ever after. We'll circle back to that.
but I am going to circle back.
Alright guys, we made it to Final Destination 3. Let's go, this one's gonna be a fun one. By the time this third installment came out in 2006, Final Destination was surely a household name. I remember seeing a trailer when it was about to come out. This was so long ago, and it was one of those trailers that comes out before there's actual footage, so it's usually like pretty short, and I just remember being absolutely floored. It's like this dark and smoky vibe, and all you see is the first few feet of tracks in front of you, and like these words are coming up in front of you, and I just remember like, wow, this is gonna be so good. Honestly, my heart is just like racing seeing that again. With that being said, and the huge success of the first two films, people were stoked when this film came out. Now that I'm older and have had a chance to go back and actually watch these movies so many years later, it's really satisfying to see how each film kind of reflects the vibe in which the era it was born, if that makes sense. So even though all three movies so far have had like a very strong teen movie vibe to them, I definitely think this third installment leans into it the most. So we're back to an all high school aged cast. There's jocks, burbs, crude humor, and it's just like more rambunctious and colorful, I feel like.
Steinmetz says he gets off on tan lines.
Right.
This is also kind of during the CGI overhaul that so many films were relying on during the time, and so I just really appreciated how well the filmmakers balanced the practical effects with the digital effects. And I'm just gonna say it now, my tune will surely change once we get to the fourth film. It was a piece of shit.
It was a piece of shit.
Like the previous two movies, no time is wasted before disaster ensues. This time we're at an amusement park, and our lead lady Wendy has a premonition that the roller coaster she and her gang are about to ride, Devil's Flight, starts to fall apart, leading to multiple bloody deaths. Now, as a roller coaster enthusiast myself, I love this concept. It's edge of your seat content, it's loud, it's colorful, it's fast, it's in your face. And most importantly, it taps into that common fear that Final Destination loves to feed on. And like, I've thought about this, even if you don't love roller coasters, then like, obviously this scene is not gonna make you feel great. And if you do love roller coasters, then this scene is definitely gonna sober you up. And then the rest of the movie just kind of follows that main template we've talked about before. Wendy's main counterpart, Kevin, approaches her early on with the lore from the previous films.
Okay, I went online looking for an explanation. 6 years ago, they went on a trip to Paris. When they were boarding, a kid had a vision.
So that's kind of helpful because it cuts out the redundancy of having to figure out like and rediscover this story over and over again, or how death works. Bloodworth is MIA, sadly. So the main addition to the lore in this installment is that Wendy discovers the photos she had taken before the disaster somehow allude to how each character will die. So in the first movie, Alex gets like the random signs that he's picking up from a bunch of different things. In the second movie, Kimberly gets her visions. And in this movie, Wendy discovers Death's plan via the photographs she took on the night of the roller coaster disaster. However, there's nothing really new as far as rules go. There are some pretty good twists in this movie though. Namely, we find out that Wendy's sister was also on the roller coaster that night. So the whole plot kind of changes and they have to find a way to make sure that her sister knows what's going on so they can save her. Which they end up being successful, for a time being. And that leads us to the very ending, which always delivers on tying up those loose ends. Basically, Wendy, her sister, and Kevin serendipitously end up on the same subway train together. Wendy has a premonition of the subway crashing, and, well, it's too late to get off the train now. Everybody dies. The end. So far, the franchise has stayed true to its main rule, its most important rule, which is that death always wins, whether it's this movie or the next. Right? Now, you may be thinking, wait, LukieSpooks, what about our friends Kimberly and Hot Cop from Final Destination 2? Funny, you should ask.
Apparently, they made a choose their fate option for this movie when it came out on DVD, so you could alter events along the way and change outcomes. In the final scene on the subway, there's an option to read an article which highlights the grisly deaths of Kimberly and Hot Cop. They fell into a wood chipper or something. However, this is not considered part of Final Destination canon because it never happened in the original stories. And I stand behind that. Did you know there are 10 novels and 2 comic books based off of Final Destination? Yeah, I mean, I'm not one to talk. I'm sitting here doing a video on Final Destination, but some people go too hard. So, yeah, as far as we know, Kimmy and Hot Cop are living their best lives. Or not their best lives. They could be padded up in some mental institution like Clear was.
Backwards.
R.I.P. Clear. Final Destination 4. Finally here. Final Destination 4. AKA The Final Destination. Wow, honestly, where to even begin? I'm going to be super brief on this one. It was a piece of garbage. And I'm okay with saying that. I feel like 99% of the people out there agree with me on this. Right? So, Final Destination 4 was conceived and born in the heat of the CGI movement. At least, I think. That's what I recall. I didn't even want to go back and look it up. In fact, the movie was made for 3D, so it just really felt like, obviously, everything kind of revolved around, making it applicable for 3D, which just really didn't translate if you were watching it out of theaters. Which, I didn't see this one in theaters. Actually, I'm pretty certain I've only seen the 6th one in theaters, just because of like how old I was when these movies came out. And so maybe I'm biased, but I don't know. Which I find ironic, because for a movie that's made for 3D to be seen in theaters, this film had a very straight-to-DVD vibe to it. First off, the disaster premonition takes place at a race car track. Now look, love NASCAR, love F1, let's go, but just something about this didn't feel relatable, which is the cornerstone of a good Final Destination movie. So not all, but most of the deaths are CGI. There's no new lore introduced, there's no blood worth, and also this movie implicitly takes place in the South. And again, look, nothing wrong with the South, love the South, lived in the South. It just doesn't stick to the vibes of those first 3 movies that have that kind of eerie, overcast, dark feeling to it that kind of makes you feel like death is a part of the scenery. Now, I have so much respect for this franchise. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't. But this one just really felt like a cash grab. And I will say, I feel like a lot of the sentiment just comes from the fact that all of the Final Destination movies are so good that it's really hard to compete with them. So maybe I'll just leave it at that I love the other ones so much that this one just didn't do it for me. And I really don't plan on bringing the 4th movie up again in this video just because it doesn't really add much, but feel free to come at me in the comments about it. Love to discuss it. Tell me what you think. But I'm gonna just leave it at that. Alright, Final Destination 5. We've made it to the 5th installment. Final Destination 5 came out 2 years later in 2011. And I think everybody breathed a big sigh of relief when they discovered that the Final Destination wasn't actually the Final Destination. And guys, I'm not gonna lie, I actually didn't know that this movie even existed until a couple years ago. I don't know. I think it was probably because it came out when I was in college and I was just focused on other things. And also I kind of remember at this point in my life, like not being as interested in horror movies because everything was just so CGI heavy that it just like wasn't as entertaining for me at the time. And again, I don't know if it was like because of the timing of it, but it also just kind of had this straight to DVD vibe to it. This movie was very redemptive in many ways for the franchise, but I do think that there was something lacking in it for me, and it's taken me a while to realize that I think it's the cast. They're an older group of people. It's kind of revolved around a work retreat. So again, I just don't think it was as relatable. Like with the high school cast, I feel like you can kind of, whether it's through nostalgia or the time that you saw it, you can kind of relate more to it. Whereas this kind of just had a little bit of a depressing work vibe to it, which could have been a whole part of the theory behind it. And this will probably have to be in another video, but there's like a whole theory about how Final Destination 5 and The Office are like interconnected somehow. Yeah, like The Office, the sitcom. So, I don't know, maybe a separate video. Overall though, I'm very glad I discovered this installment finally. It's pretty solid all the way through, but mainly, and we all know, it's because of that last scene. Incredible. This time around, our main character is Sam, and like I said before, Sam is about to go on a company work retreat. He and his coworkers load onto a bus, and then we get a nice shot of a big old bridge. So we know where this is going. I think Final Destination did a pretty good job of bringing the heat with this premonition sequence. They did a good job of bringing it back around to a very common fear, something that people experience every day that you don't have really any control over. That's being on a big ass suspension bridge.
Molly, come on!
Sam envisions the entire bridge collapsing, and although he gets his coworkers off the bus, they meet some gnarly deaths while trying to escape the crumbling structure. Quick note, this movie was also made for 3D, so that might be why I get the strong straight-to-DVD vibes to it, but they definitely did a better job balancing the practical effects and the digital effects in this movie. As far as new lore goes, we finally have a return from our beloved Bloodworth. Praise be. And we learn that if someone on death's list kills someone else, then they obtain their life force, aka however long that person was supposed to live.
So you let death have somebody else in your place, and then you take their spot in the realm of the living, all the days and years that they've yet to live. And they take your place in death.
And that ends up playing itself out in an obvious manner in the plotline. But what makes this movie different than the rest is the very end. Also, spoiler alert, giving you a chance to skip ahead if you haven't seen this yet. Alright, at certain points in the movie, Sam brings up that he was offered this job in Paris, and he's not sure if he's going to take it. After he and his love interest Molly make it to the end, we see them on a flight bound for Paris. He looks at his ticket, and it's flight 180 bound for Paris. If you take a look at that date, it's back in the year 2000. Sam's attention is brought to a scuffle that's happening on the other side of the plane. On the other side of the plane, we see Alex and co from the original Final Destination getting escorted off the plane. Oh my goodness. Amazing. I love it. Honestly, the premonition sequence was good. Probably wouldn't have cared much about the rest of the movie, but that was really, really, really smart. And I really liked that. The plane takes off, Sam and Molly die in a fiery explosion, and all is revealed that Final Destination 5 was a prequel to the original Final Destination. Just a side note, I don't know why, but it makes me laugh a little bit that as scary and omnipotent as death is supposed to be in these movies, I feel like it's always having to go back and clean up its mess.
Things can get very messy.
Well, there you have it. Like, death is its own worst enemy in these movies. I don't know, kind of makes me feel better about the whole thing. Y'all, here we are. We've made it to Final Destination 6, Bloodlines. After 14 long years, we were finally blessed with a follow-up to Final Destination 5. Alright, this is the point where I warn you that there are certainly spoilers ahead if you haven't seen the 6th installment yet. Just go see it. It's so worth it. It's really good. Bloodlines took the franchise and totally turned it on its head by introducing new lore and concepts, but still sticking true to its main tenets. And this was the first movie I actually got to see in theaters, and let me tell you, my blood was pumping. I even had to cover my eyes at certain parts. Not even gonna pretend. Not even gonna lie. The premonition sequence for the sixth movie takes place in 1969 at a place called the Skyview, which is essentially just this fictional version of the Space Needle in Seattle. And this is our first premonition that takes place in the past. Side note, I knew that this movie wasn't going to be taking place in the past because of like what they had shown in the previews. So I was like, what are they going to do with this? But anyway, we have Iris and her boyfriend going on a date at the top of this death trap waiting to happen. After convergence of Rube Goldberg-like sequences, the Skyview crumbles, resulting in an epic horror fest. Bodies falling, people burning, and objects crushing. And I have to say, of all the premonition sequences, and maybe it's because I saw this one in theaters, but this had me on the edge of my seat every single second. Actually, from like the second the movie opened, my heart was pumping because I was like, when is shit gonna hit the fan? I could seriously cut the tension with a knife. I was losing my mind. But in like the best way. Also, the cinematography for this movie was just so beautiful. Like, the filmmakers did such a good job incorporating practical effects into this movie. But even with just the opening sequence, like, long after I left the theater, I just couldn't get this crazy contrast out of my head of the beautiful mountains and scenery and sunset in the background with just the sheer terror that I was seeing in front of me on the screen. Like, damn. Also, definitely come back for part 2 where we, get into all of this cool behind the scenes stuff of how they managed to pull all of this off. Anyway, Iris falls to her death, and for the first time, we have someone else wake up from the premonition sequence. Our main girlie, Stephanie. So Stephanie is like, WTF, why do I keep having this dream? And we learn that Stephanie is actually Iris's granddaughter, and Iris is actually still alive. Stephanie finds Iris, who's basically been shacked up trying to stave off death for the past 50 years, and gives her the whole lowdown, and even a special book which explains everything. This is when we get some solid new insights into Death's design. Iris explains that she saved everyone that night. The Skyview still fell, but no one died, and we actually don't see this until closer to the end of the movie. But since her premonition took place in 1969, all of those people that she saved went on to have families of their own that should have never existed. The same rules apply as before. However, Death has a completely different way of going about things when it comes to bloodlines. If you have a family that shouldn't exist, Death likes to pick them off, one by one, in the order from oldest to youngest. So in this context, Stephanie's family has been safe all of these years because Iris has been able to hold off Death for so long. Stephanie obviously doesn't believe any of this, so on her way out, Iris decides to chase after Stephanie and leave her bunker of a home to literally prove it to her by being immediately impaled through the head. Message received. Message further received when Death starts to target Stephanie's family one by one once Iris is dead.
William John Bloodworth, but my friends call me JB.
Our beloved Bloodworth makes his reprise, and his most memorable one at that. He confirms how Death works on bloodlines and reiterates and confirms some old rules, like how you can take someone else's time if you unalive them. He also mentions Kimberly's story from Final Destination 2, and indeed confirms that she is still alive. In fact, that she's still the only one who's defeated Death. We still don't know how she's doing. At this point, he's also like, F off, I'm over this, I'm done, which I feel like is just hilarious and so on brand for Tony Todd for some reason. But he does leave us with a beautiful reveal that not only solidifies his character arc throughout the franchise, but also answers some long-awaited questions. In the premonition, Iris comforts a young boy in the Skyview and ends up helping him survive the chaos until the very end of the premonition. Turns out this little boy was Bloodworth. So that's why he knows so much, because he was on Death's list himself, and with staying in touch with Iris over all these years and learning how death works. So he became an undertaker to learn as much about death as he could in order to beat it. And I just really love this incorporation. Sadly, Tony Todd was actually dying of cancer during the filming of this last installment. The filmmakers wanted his final words to be his own so that he could leave all the fans of Final Destination with one final message. And that message was basically to enjoy every moment. That life is a gift, and you just never know which moment will be your last.
Where are you going?
I intend to enjoy the time I have left, and I suggest that you do the same. Life is precious. Enjoy every single second. You never know when.
Like I said, I just really love this incorporation. But I do have a couple bones to pick with the new lore that's been introduced with the Bloodworth storyline. One is that the design and the dialogue make it seem like Bloodworth has been kept alive because Iris is alive, as if the bloodline rules apply between them. However, if we were to stay true to the previous rules, since Iris and Bloodworth were survivors of the same disaster, then technically death should just be bouncing back and forth between them until they're all dead. Like, it shouldn't just be consistently knocking at Iris's door until it finally gets her, right? The other thing is that all of those survivors from the Skyview had enough time to make babies before death finally took them, which doesn't really work with the expeditious timing of death in the other movies. I mean, as we talked about before, in the second movie, death was already making its way back around before the first disaster had even finished. In the end, though, I don't think any actual rules are broken, and it does allow for this unique plotline to be developed, so whatever. I don't know, maybe death just worked slower in the 60s. Technology. Or maybe it just didn't have as many messes to clean up. Like it's a compound thing. It's worse over time. Well, death certainly cleans up in some of the best deaths I've seen in this franchise, and only Stephanie and her brother are left at the very end. So Stephanie ends up in a situation where she drowns and her brother brings her back to life. Now, my knee-jerk reaction was this is a major cop-out because we've already seen this in Final Destination 2. Except, in true Final Destination fashion, we have our ending, where our main characters, Stephanie and her brother, seem happy and healthy. Only to have it revealed to Stephanie that it's very likely that she never actually died. She was probably just unconscious until her brother brought her back to consciousness.
I mean, if you were unconscious and Charlie got you breathing again, then your heart didn't stop.
Because in Final Destination 2, Kimberly was actually confirmed to have flatlined in the hospital before they actually brought her back to life. So she was dead. This all becomes evident at the very end when a train derails and plows through a neighborhood, taking out everything in its path.
Oh my God, that's close. You okay?
Yeah.
Because death always wins. I really love this movie and the execution. I thought that they did such a good job making it original while still nailing so many other things on the head that they are meant to in Final Destination movies. Feels like the filmmakers brought Final Destination into 2025 instead of just doing a rebrand or a complete pivot or just doing the same thing that they've been doing in the past. And like I said before, almost every death was a pure masterpiece. And the cast was stellar, I thought. The MRI scene was just completely off the wall. The tattoo parlor scene, absolutely unhinged. I couldn't keep my eyes open for the whole thing. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And with the tattoo parlor scene, one of the most intense scenes of the entire franchise, we find out that the character doesn't actually die. Like, that was a first, and that was shocking and really well done. It landed with a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Dang, we made it, fam. So we went over every movie, the premonitions, and basically every point that's essential to know the lore up until this point.
If you stuck around with me for this, you are a real one. Now, if you're down to learn more about this franchise than you ever wanted to, how they executed these gnarly scenes, real-life Final Destination stories, the impact on our psyche and pop culture, oh yeah, we're going to be talking about the logging truck meme, then you have to come back for part 2, which will be out in only a couple days. Once again, I cannot thank you enough for hanging out with me tonight. I hope this video did it for you. And I would love to hear your thoughts about anything. Your favorite movie, your favorite death, what you think of the 6th installment if you've seen it. So drop a comment, give a like or subscribe, and until then, stay spooky.
Stay spooky.
I feel like that's how Kiki Palmer would do it.
Stay spooky.